Hey, Joe Martin here. You've seen our commercials over the years, and you may be wondering, what's in it for me? Well, ITI Technical College has been selected by Forbes magazine as a top 32-year college. But even more than that, the reason we do this is you. Our tagline is, for a better life, and we mean that, for you to be able to have the life you've always dreamed about, to do the things for your family you've always dreamed about. And it can begin here, where we are dedicated to your success, because here at ITI, the reason we do it is you.
This is Sports 225 with Lee Feinswag, and I'm Lee Feinswag. We're in our 24th year, if you count Sports Monday and Sports 225, and the only way that could happen is, well, it's my show.
My best friend, Lee Feinswag, look at the Christmas.
Sports 225 is brought to you by Breck. And now, me.
Well, it's Sports 225, and you may be asking yourself, why is Lee sitting next to an empty chair? But I'm not. Because in that chair is a 2002 version of Nick Saban, the Bank One bobblehead. Bank One came out with a series of bobbleheads that year of LSU figures, including Mike the Tiger, LSU basketball coaches John Brady and Sue Gunner, and Nick Saban. I pulled them out for this show because I've got a lot of clips from Saban when he was on the old Sports Monday, which eventually became this show, Sports 225, from 2000 to 2004. Of course, LSU had great success then, won a national championship. He changed the culture of everything, and his impact on college football since is just unbelievable. And it's all because LSU plays Alabama next Saturday in what is the biggest regular season matchup in forever, and the biggest matchup between these two teams since they played in 2012 for the 2011 national championship. So on Halloween, October 31st, Nick Saban turns 67, the same day that Dale Brown turns 83. But it's been almost 19 years since Nick Saban came on this show for the first time. It was in February. He had recently become the coach. He had a consultant tell him, you should never go back because you don't look good in those big chairs. How could you not look good in the old big chairs? But what we talked about at first was how he was going to change the regional recruiting scope for LSU.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and you'd mentioned this the other day, and I was glad to hear you say this. Just the opposite of what you said. You know, coming down here to get skill players, you want to expand the geographic base from which you recruit. You know, personally, I think that's a good thing, but you have to, don't you?
Well, I don't see the teams. I look at what the teams that are winning the championship are doing. In this league, and Tennessee's not regional recruiting. Alabama got a defensive lineman from Canada. They got a running back from Cincinnati the year before that they beat us on when we were at Michigan State, Brandon Myree. And they're even moving out more and more. Florida, you know, Jesse Palmer's from Canada. They look for linemen especially, you know, in other parts of the country. They recruit over here a lot. Louisiana's a long way from Florida. So, and Florida State got 6 or 7 players from Texas this year in their recruiting class. So I think you have to develop a big enough pool of talented players in recruiting that you can get what you need at all positions, and you got to go as far as you need to go to get them.
Well, the next time Nick Saban came on Sports Monday as the LSU football coach was in the summer before his first season. And by then, well, we had to talk a little bit about his personality.
Of course, you're still undefeated, and that's a great thing. But, I mean, how about like last week, Glenn Guilbeau had a story in The Advocate where he defends your personality. I mean, I've talked to you before. You don't seem like that bad a guy.
Well, I never thought so, but, I think sometimes that, reputations get developed, and sometimes when you go through a circumstance and a situation like leaving Michigan State, some people are, not as positive as maybe they would have been. Kind of like your girlfriend is not real positive if you jilled her after 5 years. She doesn't go around town saying good things about you. So sometimes those things get kind of overblown in some ways, and I'm just very pleased and happy with all the people that we've been able to meet and how the people here in Baton Rouge and all over the state have, kind of accepted us as a family and have been very supportive.
We also talked about how he'd become known as a defensive genius, and the look on his face was priceless when I said that. But it was pretty interesting for a former quarterback to become the defensive guy that he was and is.
You are regarded by many as a defensive genius. I know you take it very seriously. No, I mean that seriously. And but you were a quarterback in high school, weren't you?
Yeah.
And but You know, the old saying, offense sells tickets, defense wins games. I mean, you know, when I was a little kid, I drew football plays, but from the offensive end. When did you become a defensive guy where that became your mindset and the main focus for you?
Well, I think because I was a quarterback and I really spent 1 year as a college player on the freshman team as a quarterback, had a good understanding of offense, formations, adjustments, you know, how you block plays, pass routes, how you read routes, middle of the field open, middle of the field closed, you know, basic fundamental things that because I was too short as a quarterback, I got moved to defensive back. So I had a pretty good understanding of offense. And as a player, I enjoy playing in the secondary. And I think when you play in the secondary, you have to understand big picture. If you play line positions, you know, you don't have to understand big pictures because things happen in small places, and your initial key comes from something that's pretty immediate. But you got to see more than one thing as a DB. And I had good coaches. Don James was a defensive coach. He was a secondary coach, and playing for him as a head coach, I think I learned a lot. And when I started being a GA, I learned a lot. So my perspective just came: how do you apply these defensive things to offensive concepts? And the good understanding that I gained from being a quarterback has helped me a lot as a defensive coach.
All right, this is Sports 225. You've been watching Nick Saban from the early 2000s when he was the LSU football coach. We're going to take this break, and when we get back, a little bit more Nick Saban on the eve of LSU playing Alabama in the biggest regular season game in 6 or 7 years. I'm Lee Feinswag at Sports 225.
Hi, I'm the human dislike button. You may recognize me as the guy who enforces rules at Breck Parks. Check out my amazing presentation. Did you know? Motorized vehicles are not allowed in Breck Parks. Sales and solicitation are prohibited without permission from Breck. And my favorite rule, keep Breck Parks clean by placing all trash in trash cans. Come on, you can do this. For more information about these and other Breck rules, please visit breck.org/HDB.
Well, we're back on Sports 225, a little bit different of a Sports 225 because I'm spending some time showing you old clips of Nick Saban when he was the LSU football coach. And, you know, I visited with him on set here a bunch as the 2002 Nick Saban. Hey, show my guy Nick over here. There you go. There's Nick. This next segment that we're going to talk about was right before the 2001 season. LSU went 8-4 in 2000, his first year. But just listen to the guys that he's talking about on the 2001 team that went 10-3.
God, I hate to see you a few years from now after you,
Right.
after that next national championship. Oh, all right. New players, freshmen and transfers. Tell me a few who are going to make an impact this year, who you think will step in and see significant playing time.
Well, you know, we're hopeful that some of the freshmen will be able to make a contribution to the team. But again, that maturity thing that goes along with being a freshman is something that you're always concerned about with those guys. It'll certainly help us. You know, if Ben Wilkerson can help us in the offensive line, if, you know, some of those young offensive linemen can be mature enough to become backups or guys that we could go to if we have some injury problems. You know, Marquise Hill, Brandon Washington as defensive linemen certainly are the body types that you're looking for, you know, at those positions. Michael Clayton has, you know, a lot of ability as a wide receiver. Benny Brazil is one of the fastest guys in the country as a wide receiver. Corey Webster is a newcomer who has ability and needs to contribute to this football team in some kind of way, whether it's to be a productive receiver or be in some other position. So, you know, we have some young players coming along that we need some people to step up at linebacker so we get some consistency in terms of depth at that position, so that if we do lose some of our good players, we're not going to have, you know, a catastrophic situation there relative to the drop-off in performance. So there's a lot of good players coming up. This freshman class, I think there's several guys that can contribute. Which one of those guys are going to be mature enough to do it? You know, we'll just have to wait and see.
All right, Nick Saban came on the show again before the 2002 season, and if you recall, that turned out to be a really disappointing year at 8-5 for the Tigers. But one of the things we talked about was New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick, it's easy for me to say, who, like Saban, what he's done since that time is legendary. But even then, he was having tremendous success. He's also a guy who, you know, from the outside looking in, you wouldn't want to hang out with. Saban said that wasn't the case.
They achieve a lot more than anybody thought they would. You know, is a real mark of a good coach, and to see Bill get that kind of recognition was a real positive, I think, for me, because I think I've always felt and held him in high esteem as a person and as a coach, and I'm just happy for him to be able to win the Super Bowl.
The image that people like me have of him from just seeing him on TV and the interviews is nothing like what he's really like, is he? Because he comes across as being a real tight ass, you know, just in general. But I mean, he told this during. Well, no, it's true. But like you said, when you were with the Browns and he was there, like Bon Jovi, for example, is a friend of his who would come to practices, and you would go
and run out for passes, and you know, we'd have to tell the secondary guys, you know, don't hit the guy. But you know, Bill has a sense of humor, and you know, we all do. We're all people, and we're all just like everybody else. And you know, Bill Belichick is as well, but some people's image that gets projected through the media, and I feel like I've been a victim of that, you know, some as well, is not really what you're like and what you are. And I think the better you get to know people, the more you see that, and it's good to see that people see that different side of Bill sometimes as well.
Well, what you said was that, you know, we talked about it before on a break, and you said that he was a guy who likes to go to rock and roll concerts, so you would go with him. But you told me, too, this past summer you went to see the Eagles, and, you know, coincidentally, Joe Walsh and you were at Kent State together.
Right, and Joe played well, and I enjoyed it. And but we had a good time there. And
hey, we all had our moments in college now.
But you know, Bill, well, you know, back in my day in college in the early '70s, I mean, going to these concerts and going to see the Rolling Stones and all that was a big deal. And they used to give the football players $50 and a free ticket to be security guard. I mean, I did that. That was great. So I enjoyed that. And we grew up in a different time. But Bill. We went backstage to see Ringo Starr, Bill and I.
No kidding.
We went backstage to see Joe Walsh. And we went to see the Eagles, you know, he and I. So we went to a few concerts.
That's pretty cool.
Incognito.
That's awesome.
But I wasn't incognito the other night. I tried to be, but I couldn't.
I think you're past that now, at least in the Deep South, where there's anybody who knows college football. You know?
You might be right.
Well,
we enjoy it.
Well, in this next segment with Nick Saban, and notice I left that little bit of that ad that was left over for the old Baton Rouge Kingfish. Those of you who remember the hockey team had to see that and get a smile. My gosh, that seems like a long time ago when then the Centroplex was getting packed with hockey fans. But finally, in this segment, which was in our show together in August of 2003, which was the year LSU won the national championship, we talked about what a mess Alabama was. Little did we know that 4 years later, Nick Saban would become the head coach at Alabama.
Kingfish Hockey, the year to be here. Call 336-GOAL.
There's going to be a lot of balance in the SEC this year.
I'll sneak this in before we go to the break. The whole Alabama situation, I mean, from watching that from within your league, you must have shaken your head a couple of times and said, what the hell's going on there?
Well, you know, I will say this, that it is unusual for an institution to have the turmoil that they've had to kind of persevere for the last, you know, several years. But, you know, that's a strong program, lots of tradition, you know, lots of good people there, and they have a lot of good football players.
Do you know Mike Price?
No, I don't know him. I know Mike Shula, but I don't know Mike Price very well.
Well, I hope you're enjoying this old Nick Saban clips show. Later on, Ron Higgins will join us from Jackson, Mississippi, via the powers of the intraweb. But we got a little bit more with Nick Saban when we come back to Sports 225.
Hi, I'm the human dislike button. You may recognize me as the rules guy for Breck Parks. Sometimes the rules slip past us, so I put together this amazing presentation. Did you know? Golf practice is only allowed at designated golf facilities. Firearms, explosives, and weapons are not allowed on Breck property. Metal detecting is allowed in some parks, but go to Breck's website to learn more about this and other park rules. For more information, visit breck.org/HDB.
We're back on Sports 225, doing a little bit different kind of a show today. I'm Lee, like it says, but I'm joined by Nick over here in the other chair. The 2002 Nick Saban Bank One bobblehead. Bank One, of course, ultimately transformed into what is now Chase. So they did a series of bobbleheads, and Nick. Before the 02 season, which if you recall in 2001, LSU was so good, I asked him, like, what do you do for an encore? And he talked about sustaining top-level success, which is what he wanted to establish at LSU and did before he left for the Miami Dolphins, and then, of course, has done at Alabama.
You know, it's early in the show, but you got to ask, what do you do for an encore? I mean, what an incredible season last year. You win the SEC Western Division, you win the SEC Championship, and you win the Sugar Bowl. I mean, things like that don't happen every year. And you could have a great season again this year and not show that much success.
Well, but to me, I think the thing that we want to do long term as a program in football is to be a nationally recognized dominant program that wins with consistency year in and year out. So the challenge is, are we a flash-in-the-pan team who wins 10 games one year and then can't live with the success of it all, get too satisfied, and relieve that we don't have to continue to try to improve, and then we don't dominate with consistency and become a program that's recognized as Nebraska is, or some of those people that are good all the time. And to do that, your players have to have a high standard that they want to achieve at. And it's not relative to who you're playing. It's what they want to do. It's what's important to them. They have a burning desire, to be consistently good and play at a high standard, and that's what's important to them. And they got to make good choices and decisions every day to do that.
Well, all that being said, he came on in 2004, before that season, reflecting on the national championship season of the year before.
The other thing is, we weren't exactly sitting here a year ago talking about a team that was going to win a national championship. I don't think we were talking about a team that was, had good expectations, but not great expectations. Is that fair to say?
I think that's probably right, and I think that every team develops a personality and a chemistry, and just like we had some problems on last year's team, and I can recall them. We were short at safety. We had two freshmen play a significant role at safety last year who were incoming, who we knew very little about. Everybody had big-time questions about the running back situation, and obviously, Justin Vincent and Ali Broussard filled in, especially when Joseph Adai and Chiron Carey were injured early in the season. So all the questions got answered the right way by the young guys, and this year's team probably has some of the same questions. You talk about a young receiver core, talented young guys that haven't played that much, question marks at quarterback to some degree in terms of experience and that type of thing. Defensively, we lost a few guys up front. Are we going to be able to replace those guys to have the same kind of dominance? And with two starters back at linebacker, we really lost a lot of depth and a starter that need to be replaced with younger players. So there's a lot of questions about this year's team too, including losing Donnie Jones, who has punted every punt since we've been here. So there are always questions. How the questions get answered, I think, determine to a large degree how good your team can be.
All right, when we get back to Sports 225, we'll be joined by Ron Higgins. He's up in Jackson, Mississippi. He's the sports editor of the Clarion Ledger, the dean of SEC sports writers, always with perspective, and he'll offer some on LSU, Alabama, and more. And my thanks to Nick Saban from the Bank One 2002 bobblehead series. Nick, say goodnight. I'm Lee Feinswalk. It's Sports 225.
Well. Looks like someone forgot all neighborhood Breck Parks close at dark.
You want another?
I think they'll pass. Amplified music and sound is prohibited without permission from Breck. No alcoholic beverages on Breck property. Smoking of tobacco products is not allowed. Use of fire is prohibited except in grills. Gotta remember, Breck wants you to have fun, but in the right way. For more info, go to breck.org/HDB.
All right, we're done with Nick Saban. Now we're heading up to Jackson, Mississippi to talk to Ron Higgins. Of course, he's from Baton Rouge, came back to to work for NOLA.com for the longest time, a frequent guest on this show, and a guy I love to visit with. Through the powers of the internet and video connections, we got him on to talk about LSU Alabama, how he's doing and a few other things. So from the home office, me and Ron Higgins.
All right, as promised, back in the home office, and it's a little bit different look, but you see my good man Ron Higgins up in Jackson, Mississippi. It was so much easier when he lived over a few minutes away from the Cox Studios. But alas, he's up in Jackson working for the Clarion Ledger as a sports editor and seeing a whole different side of things these days. Well, with LSU Alabama on the horizon, and by the way, I wanted you to see my Nick Saban bobblehead from Bank One from the old days.
There you go. That's old school stuff there.
Yeah.
Old school stuff.
But anyway, tell me how's it going?
It's going great, man. It's a great job. I got a staff of young writers, but they're all eager and all work hard. I've done Ole Miss, Mississippi State, before. That world before in Memphis for a long time, so I'm familiar with the state. It's not a big stretch for me, and it's been good. I know people here. I've known Rick Cleveland for a long time, who I think is probably one of the best writers the South has ever had. He's still in town, and his son Tyler works in my staff, so it's been good.
Well, of course, Ron was a frequent guest on Sports 225 when he lived in Baton Rouge for the number of years that he was with NOLA.com before leaving this fall. And I wanted to get him on to give his perspective on LSU Alabama, which is since they played for the national championship, which turns out to be pretty long ago. This is quite a big game, 1-4, and pretty exciting. Your thoughts on it?
Well, it's a huge game, and it's just from LSU's perspective. They just kind of got to keep the first half in check. Alabama's gone out and destroyed people in the first half of games, and they're averaging like about 365 total offense in the first half, which is more total offense than about 20 FBS teams have for entire games, which is just ridiculous. And of course, now that because Devin White is out for the first half against Alabama, it becomes even more important that LSU kind of holds the ship together from hitting the rocks for one half until he can kind of tag in. I really do. I want to see Devin White tag in like a tag team wrestler. I want him to stand on the sideline the first play of the second half, and then go tag in for the guy. Now, bring a steel chair with you, tag in.
It's Ron Higgins. He thinks about sports like nobody else does. Is Alabama going to win the game?
If Tua's playing, yeah. I think he's tremendous. But I think it'll be if LSU can keep it close at the first half, I think it's going to be a hell of a game. LSU is the edge LSU has is that it can cash in every possession with field goals. Now that sounds like it doesn't help, but it helped against Mississippi State. It's helped all year, and that's one thing that LSU really lacked last year. Where they have a possession, and they get within field goal range and miss field goals, they wouldn't cash in. Now they cash in every time they get near in field goal range. And I think that's a big help. Also, the fact that they've got to stop Alabama from like scoring every possession or scoring as quick as they do. Alabama has scored too many times this year on the first play of the series or the second play of the series. The difference this Alabama team and others that ever come to LSU or LSU's played is it has quick strike capability. They can score that quick, and so I think it'll be a good game. I just think I'm sure Randall will have a good game plan. I think LSU will play their butt off. They'll be rested. They'll be fired up because of the Devin White stuff. But until I see Alabama get beat, I'll believe it. Just the way I am.
Ron Higgins, gone from Baton Rouge up in Jackson, Mississippi. He's a sports editor of the Jackson Clarion Ledger. Tell us how they can read your stuff and still follow you at Ron Hig on Twitter.
Yeah, still on Ron Hig on Twitter. You go to ClarionLedger.com and click up the sports and find me there. So I'm still around, just not right there. It's kind of strange, not driving 10 minutes and being in your studio. But this is cool too.
Yeah, it's the best we can do. So on behalf of me and the 2002 or 3 Nick Saban bobblehead, we say thank you, Ron Higgins.
Well, I love that little statue of the Sabanator. Is that life size?
So there you go, a different kind of Sports 225. We had a lot of Nick Saban stuff. We had Ron Higgins. And next week, we'll spend the whole show talking about LSU, Alabama, because it'll be that game week. In the meantime, thanks for watching Sports 225.
At carnival time by Baton Rouge Bay, that's the site of my story. At Spanish Town Mardi Gras, things can get blurry.